Hello and welcome to the HR Business Partner Podcast, a podcast from an HR business partner to give you some insight, both blunt and basically just blunt, about the human resources world. I am your host at the HR Business Partner, or the HRBP. You can find me on TikTok. This is obviously available on YouTube as well as anywhere you find your podcasts. Something a little different than the normal wear and tear of the podcast industry. I think a lot of individuals in a lot of different areas of expertise have podcasts now. It's kind of the big thing that you do. I feel like maybe back in the day, you wrote an article, a research paper, people read that, opinion pieces and things like that. In a digital age, though, I think podcasting is kind of the way that you express yourself and get information out there. So I decided to start an HR-based podcast. And frankly, a pretty blunt one at that. You know, I think a lot of HR professionals do a very good job of giving the corporate line is kind of the rough way of calling it. I think it's just a polished message that has a very intentional purpose to it. I think a lot of HR professionals are very good at that because we have to be, right? That's like a part of our job. And I want to create a podcast where, you know, I give maybe a little bit more insight into the world of human resources, the dark side of it, the good side of it, and hopefully shed a little bit more light on the human resources world and, give you a little more appreciation to the HR professionals that are out there. I think we get a bad rep in what we do in human resources, and I think a lot of that's unjustified. It's just a lack of understanding of what HR is really meant to do and why people get into this career path and why companies do value HR as a service to their business internally. So I'll go over my qualifications and everything like that later. I don't think you want to hear that right up front. Today, I want to talk about two major things. Every single podcast is going to have two topics that I'll talk about. Today, I want to talk about applicant tracking systems and the way that we gather information about our candidates. And you probably have experienced that as job seekers out there. If you've applied for any jobs, how you go about doing so is very important. And then I want to talk about just the way we communicate in terms of being in the office and communicating with email and virtual messaging and direct messaging. So that's going to be the two topics we have for today. But let's start off with the headliner topic that I want to talk about on this first episode. And that is the applicant tracking system, and more specifically, the candidate experience right off the bat. Now, we talk about candidate experience a lot in human resources, predominantly the talent acquisition and recruiting world. It's basically the entire experience that you as a candidate go through from the moment that you look for a job to the moment your butt is in the seat and you are performing work for the company. Now, you ask an HR professional about this 5, 10, 15 years ago, nobody really cared about the candidate experience. You know what? If you want a job, apply for it. If we find you and we want you to work for us, we'll reach out to you. Like, that was the end right there. Nobody really gave a second thought to, well, how does the candidate feel while they're applying for us? Are they excited to apply for us? Are we making it too cumbersome to apply for us? Nobody cared about that because it was like, if you want a job, you will apply for a job, and we will make it as hard or as easy as we want it to be to try to weed out the bad candidates from the good ones so that we can find the right person quickly. That has changed. And I think a lot of companies are realizing that, and I wish more would. So think about it this way. For all of you that are out there that are either currently job seeking because you need a job, are currently thinking about moving to a different job and are actively seeking other employment, or you're just glancing around, which, by the way, more power to you. I feel like everybody in any position should always be glancing at the world around them. You should not be satisfied in what you're doing. You can always look for better. And that doesn't mean that you're not loyal to your company. That doesn't mean that you can't find success and longevity in your current role. But with the way that the economy is right now and the way that the job seeker market is, I think you are doing yourself a disservice if you do not actively, or I shouldn't say actively, if you are not passively glancing around at your skill set as it compares to the industry, especially in an era where it is unbelievably transparent, not only what jobs are out there, but what it's like working at a company and how much you would likely get paid if you moved, right? And that's a whole other topic we can talk about, is the whole job hunting for more, or job hopping for more compensation and that whole process, right? But what I want to specifically talk about today is the very first interaction that any candidate/employee will ever have with your business, and that is the application process. So say, for example, you were a company and you have an open position. It does not matter what position this is, right? Let's just say for the sake of argument that this is a professional position. It is not entry level. It requires some form of a higher education or years of experience of some sort. And you are posting it in the hopes of getting as many candidates as you can that fit the qualifications. You will scan them and invite a top 10 or 15 to phone screen with you. You narrow it down from there until eventually you have your candidate, right? Me as a candidate, the first thing that I'm going to notice is the candidate or is the actual application itself. And be honest with me, listeners. Do you read the job description that's posted when you apply for a job? Because the overwhelming majority of individuals do not. There are a few things they look for. A, the title of the job. Does the title of the job match what I believe I can do with my career? B, how many years of experience and what are the education requirements required for the job? Are those clearly listed, and are they in a place where A, I can find them easily, and B, as a company, you could put important information around it, right? C, right now, can the job be done remote? A lot of people want to work remote. I don't blame them. It's an awesome perk that you can provide your employees. Can the job be done remote? Is it considered hybrid, or is it within a commutable distance from where I am? And then the next portion, is there public wage information? Do I have a reasonable ability to know how much this job pays? Is it more than I currently make? Or is it sufficient enough for me to warrant going to this position? And then from there, they apply. They don't care about the type of job it is, the culture of the company. None of that stuff they're going to look at right away, right? Candidates want that piece of information quickly so they can decide if they are going to apply for your job. Now, you're going to have outliers for this, obviously. You're going to have individuals that are interested in knowing, like, okay, what does this company specifically do? What would I be doing on a day-to-day basis? Does my resume match the requirements of the job? Can I tailor my resume to, be more noticeable than the other candidates in this role, knowing what I know about the role? Like that, there's going to be people out there that do that. If you are applying for jobs, and again, this is a conversation for another time. But there are ways that you can tailor your resume to applications specifically, so that way you are showcasing the right talents and the right knowledge that you have for the role that you want to go into, right? I digress. I could go on and on about that conversation for a long time. So after a candidate decides to apply, this, I think, is the most important part about applying for a position. And as a company, this is the most important part of the applicant experience. How difficult is it to apply for a job? And now, before you roll your eyes at that or check out of this part of the conversation, think about it this way. How many jobs have you applied for where you can click a single button and it's like, I have all your information already, your application is sent? Or is a application that requires you to attach your resume and you're done? That's awesome, right? It's so easy. You don't have to spend a lot of time applying for the job. You don't have to spend a lot of time worrying about doing the right things or placing the right things or answering the right questions up front. There are additional steps, which can be like, obviously your voluntary disclosures about, your veteran status and your disability status, your identifications and things like that. Those questions can come as well. A lot of people want those questions up front, and I will explain to you why. A lot of applicant tracking systems will ask you for all that stuff up front to ensure that diversity and inclusion metrics are given to the company itself. So those are usually really important. So even then, that's a pretty simple application process, right? The most simple way is give me your name, give me your resume, fill out your voluntary disclosures, we're done. Your application is sent, we'll get back to you, right? I love that approach. Now, there's a downside to that. A lot of applicant tracking systems can't read a wide variety of resumes. They will try to parse it the best that they can, but some resumes do not parse well. That's why if you look at my Fiverr profile, it is in the description section below. One of the features and one of the services that I can provide to you is writing a resume for you. Writing a flashy resume that has a lot of images that looks really pretty is not a practical resume to get noticed on because applicant tracking systems have a hard time reading it. The more simple your resume is, the more successful it can be But if you are looking for human resources advice and personal counseling at a very reasonable rate, or resume writing critique, mock interviews, preparation for interviews, and or if you are a business looking for consulting, you can check out my Fiverr profile, check it in the description section below, or you can specifically go to tinyurl.com/ and I'm going to forget the slash here. I am not prepared, apparently. You can go to tinyurl.com / this is absolutely terrible that I'm not more prepared to provide this URL. It's relatively new for me. tinyurl.com / Ratsky Fiverr services is the slash there. You can see all of the services that I provide. So the downside of a very simple applicant system and applicant experience is that you are going to have to parse more resumes. Now, for positions that get high volume of candidacy, that can be daunting for a recruiter, and it's expensive, right? But let me tell you this, for most companies, that is not the problem that you run into. You cannot, as an organization, make the application system difficult. And there are a lot of leaders out there that will tell you, oh, well, the right candidate will want to apply for this job, and they are going to be willing to fill out every single detail about their candidacy on the application: work history, education, skill sets, 3 references, their transcripts, a fucking cover letter, excuse my French. Like, everyone's got, they're going to do it. The right candidate will be dripping to do those things. It's not a problem. Bullshit. Absolutely terrible. It is awful if you require a candidate to do that. And I know for a fact that high quality candidates, the second they even see that a cover letter is required, will click out of your services so fast that you will be losing out on good candidates simply because you want a cover letter that you as an organization will not read. It is asinine. Make your application process simple. Get the information that you need. Provide optional ways that candidates can express more interest than others. I would recommend that if you have a position that you're really interested in, is to write a cover letter for it. You should provide the candidate an ability to add additional documentations optionally, or give them an optional field to basically write a message to you, the hiring leader. You could do that on Indeed. You could do that on LinkedIn. There are a lot of easy ways to do that on your careers webpage. But if you require your candidate to fill out a massive application system similar to that of walking into your Dollar General and filling out a 2-page application for a $7 an hour position that requires you to fill out X, Y, and Z of everything you've ever done in your entire life, no one wants to do that. You are narrowing your candidate pool massively. The second big no-no, requiring your candidate to enroll or log in to your website to make a candidate profile. Now, there's a positive to that, and there's a reason that companies will do this. It is a really good way to track your candidacy in your application pool, and it's a good way to actually reach out to your candidate pool if a position becomes available, or to keep them engaged in wanting to work for your company, right? And I will say that if you are going to have a login for, and you can easily see a history of applications, right? So you can see if somebody's applied in the past and what previous thoughts were on that individual. If you are going to have a login for your applicant tracking system, make it easy. A lot of logins use Google now, so that I can simply sign in with Google, and I don't have to create a username. I don't have to create a password. I can just use my Google email. It immediately enrolls me in, and there's nothing more to do. That is easy enough that most candidates won't be deterred. But for example, there is, and I'm not going to name names, but there is a specific applicant tracking company that if I ever see a job that requires me to create a login with this company, I won't do it. I won't apply for that job. And I know I'm not the only one. Now, it may be a niche thing because I'm in HR and I know the company, but yeah, there is a specific company that if I see a job using that application tracking system, I know it's going to be so unbelievably cumbersome to not even get a response and to not even get an interview that I'm not even going to apply for the job. I click away immediately. I say that's a bummer, and I move on. So you have to make the candidate experience easy to apply for your job. From there, it almost doesn't matter from there, right? Reach out to your candidates at a regular interval. Make sure that your rejection email or your we're looking into it email makes sense. That's a huge gripe for me. And we're not going to talk about it too much today. We can talk about it in a different podcast. Let me know in the comment section below on YouTube, or you can reach out again at the HRBP on TikTok to express, some thoughts and different topics that you might want covered. But I have a whole spiel that I can go into when your rejection email makes no sense. To say, I've gotten these rejection emails and they're hilarious to me, right? We were impressed by your education, or we were impressed by your qualifications, but we selected somebody more qualified. You cannot be impressed by qualifications and then say you picked somebody more qualified. Then you're not impressed. If you were impressed by my qualifications, that indicates that I'm more qualified than the position requires. I should have been granted an interview. So don't say that on your rejection emails. I know the recruiter is not sitting there going, well, I was impressed by this person and this person, so they get this type of email. Oh, the rest of you are just going to get thanks, but no thanks. They don't do that. So anyway, again, I can go into that in length and I won't. But if your application system is simple, but the rest of your process is a little more difficult, your applicant screening process is difficult, it's a high level of rejection, you're only taking 10% of your applicants, 5% of your applicants that are qualified, you can make those things more difficult. But the big thing is that the candidate experience is instantly improved if applying for your job is simple. If they don't have to fill out the same shit that's on their resume already in your applicant tracking system. Again, companies will do this because that allows them to have consistency on the back end. It provides better data for them to easily see what your qualifications are, because applicant tracking systems can struggle with parsing resumes automatically. And especially in high volume positions, a recruiter is not going to read every single resume. They are going to let the applicant tracking system automatically highlight these individuals are qualified based on what's there on their resume and what they filled out on the application itself. What I'm telling you, though, is screw that. I will, most of the time, take a little extra manpower to go through resumes and try to parse that data automatically than to sacrifice my applicant experience just to save dollars on the back end and time on the back end. I will sacrifice that more often than not 100% of the time, but more often than not. Man, that's something that's been on my chest for a while. As somebody who has recently been open for work as of a couple of years ago, I applied for 200 or 300 jobs. I had an interview rate of 6 or 7%, which honestly is actually pretty normal, even for jobs you're qualified for. And the amount of jobs that I just would not apply to because I knew it would take me 20 plus minutes to apply is astronomical. I'm telling you right now, companies and managers out there, if your application system takes more than 10 minutes for an applicant to apply to, you will start to see a drop off in your candidates. And not even quality. None of this is quality. It's all a numbers game at that point. It's just the raw volume of applicants, both quality and inexperienced. You're going to see a decline if your application system takes more than 10 minutes. And you will see a further decline if every single candidate you require to do a video interview as a part of their application, you require them to do a skills assessment or a personality assessment. Most candidates won't do that. Invite your top candidates to do that and make sure that they are aware we are actually considering you for this job. It is an extra step that takes a little bit more effort, but is infinitely better than the alternative. Infinitely better. Do not require every single candidate to do that, because you are going to lose the quality candidates that are no, I'm not going to do that. We're not in the age where a candidate has to sell themselves to you and you alone to get a job. No, you have to also sell yourself to your candidates. Your next big hire could be looking at your job page right now and going, no thanks. I don't want to work for you because it's too difficult to apply, because my time is valuable, because I'm passively looking and I don't want to commit myself to a lot of time to a job that I'm not even sure I want. And now you may be thinking, leaders, well, I don't want the candidate that doesn't want me. So let me frame to you like this. You have to do a better job of making people want to work for you. There are way too many options now, especially ever since COVID hit, and especially since now the workforce is more remote. There are more options than ever. I couldn't work at Amazon HR 5 years ago. Kind of. There's been an explosion of remote work now. There are companies out there that are excellent employers that, because of geographical location, people couldn't work for before, and now they can. There are more options than ever for your candidate candidates to go somewhere else. There are other companies just like you. There are leaders that are better than you and worse, that if they get a grip on the applicant tracking system, you have lost candidates just like that. It is competitive. And it's competitive for the candidates, but it is also competitive for you, the business. It's simple as that. So if you are not doing right by your candidates in your applicant tracking system, you're failing. You are failing right away. You are restricting your ability to gain candidates, and you're crap. in my blunt opinion, I hate working and seeing HR departments that have a robust applicant tracking system that requires the candidate to set aside 30 minutes of their life to fill out an application, only for us to not talk to them again. That is absolute garbage. You will never see that candidate again, too. Even if you get the right candidate, like let's say your next director of information systems has applied to your company as a senior project manager. It took them 30 minutes to fill out an application. It took them another 10 minutes to do a video interview. Your applicant tracking system flagged them as unqualified because they didn't see on their resume these kind of qualifications and these kind of certifications. After 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, they get a rejection email from you saying, thank you, we were impressed with your qualifications, but we have elected to go in a different direction. That candidate will never apply for your job again. And then suddenly that director of information systems comes up. That exact candidate would have been perfect for that job. They are a cultural fit, and you will never know. Because the job that they applied for, that you turned them down and never looked at their resume because your applicant tracking system sucks and it's too cumbersome for the employee, deterred them forever. Are you okay with that? Because I'm not. Be better. All right, we're going to take a small little break here. You are listening to the HR Business Partner Podcast here on YouTube and wherever podcasts are available. I am the HRBP at the HRBP on TikTok. We're going to take a small little music break to allow me to collect my thoughts and get ready for the second half of the podcast. Again, if you want personalized human resources consulting, either as an individual contributor or a job seeker or as a corporation, you can reach out to me directly on Fiverr. If you search for providing high quality HR advice and career consulting, you will see me on Fiverr. You can follow me at the HRBP on TikTok. You can basically hire my services for a very reasonable price. $30 for 30 minutes will get me in front of you on a phone call, on Google Meets, on anything you would like. We will talk about your career and your next steps. As a business, you can consult me, and I can provide direct consultation services to you and your company. Contact me for more on those kind of things. But all right, at the end of this break and after the next music break, we are going to be talking about communication and being able to reach out to your staff and what they are looking for from you as a leader. You are listening to the HR Business Partner Podcast. All right, we are back here on the HR Business Partner Podcast. I am the HRBP. Thank you for listening wherever podcasts are found. Again, if you want personalized HR consultation for you or your company, you can reach out to me directly on Fiverr. For affordable rates, I will provide HR consulting to you, resume writing, cover letter writing, mock interview preparations, and mock interviews, as well as a plethora of HR experience directly to you and your situation. Reach out to me on Fiverr or reach out to me on the HRBP on TikTok for more details. All right, we're going to talk about communication and being able to connect to employees as a leader. Now, I think this topic has been like beaten to death when it comes to HR, when it comes to organizational development. It's like, oh, communication, open communication. Make sure you're open with your leaders and with your employees. Make sure you listen properly, right? Those are the canned messages you're going to get in pretty much any HR seminar and any book that you read, most books, I should say, any pamphlet that you get about communicating better, right? And in a world where everyone can listen to the same message and hear the same thing and do the same thing, I think these messages are perfectly acceptable, right? But we as humans are not robots. We do not operate the same way. A leader that struggles with communication cannot be grouped with other leaders that struggle with communication. There are themes that are pretty common, but everybody is individual and everybody is unique. And the way that you communicate is unique. And the things that you enjoy in a meeting and the way that you conduct meetings and the way that you talk to your staff is unique. Now, we as HR can group a lot of this stuff into poor communicator, good communicator, excellent communicator, right? We group all these things because, frankly, if you're in an HR department of more than like 200 employees that you service, you don't have time to really know the individual traits of everybody that's leading people. It's very difficult to do that. So I have to provide general advice here and general overview of communication because I don't know you, the listener, you, the leader, you, the employee. I don't know your individual communication style. I don't know your personality. I don't know if you're an extrovert or an introvert. I do not know if you have certain triggers in communication. I don't know your past. I don't know how you were communicated before. It's very possible you've been fired in your life, that you've been communicated poorly with, that you've been yelled at, that you've been demeaned. There are maybe you've worked for some of the best leaders that this country has to offer. And that doesn't have to be at top companies. Maybe you worked as a stock person at a mom and pop grocery store in the middle of nowhere, and you had the best leader that you're ever going to have in your entire life because they communicated, they respected you, and you found comfort in them as a human being. I don't know these things, right? So I can't provide specific advice, but let me talk in general terms that most HR people that you talk to and the HR departments that work with you and for you aren't going to tell you unless you really build trust with them, right? Communication is not a Band-Aid. Communication is not a machine. Communication is ever flowing and ever changing, right? The way that you communicate with somebody changes from day to day. You might have the perfect, most well thought out message and you could deliver it perfectly, and you caught someone on a bad day, they take it the wrong way, right? That's just the world we live in. And it's a good thing, right? I think a lot of people disparage how soft society has gotten. And in some ways that's true, right? In some ways that's frustrating, and I get it. But the fact that we are more conscious and aware than ever of mental health issues in this country, the fact that we are more conscious and aware of how other people are feeling when we talk to them, we are more respectful about their identities, we are more respectful about pronouns. Even if we're not all the way there yet, we are more respectful today than we were years ago, months ago, maybe even days ago. And that's a good thing, right? But you as a leader, and frankly, anybody that's listening to this that has to have engaging conversations with other people, that's outside the scope of personal life, that has to be about work, it's important to remember those things, right? So we talk about communication. Let me talk to you about the first step that I think you need to take to become an effective communicator. I'm gonna gear this entire section towards the leaders that are out there, the leaders of people, right? The first thing that you need to do is understand your audience. If you're a new leader or you're just listening to me and you're thinking, man, I really want to get better at this thing, right? You have to know your audience. Understand the employees that work for you on an individual level. And that means taking the time to get to know your staff. And again, people might be rolling their eyes at this or checking out. Maybe you've already clicked off. If not, you're clearly still listening, right? I don't mean knowing that your employee, Susanna, lives at X location, has 4 cats, and on the weekends likes golfing. No, that's not what I mean. You need to observe the way that your staff communicates, the way that they receive information, and the way they work. And I'm not talking about watching their every move. Jesus Christ, please don't do that. What I am talking about, though, is observing their nonverbal responses to the way that you talk to them, observing how they communicate via text, and frankly, having open conversations with them about communication. It has nothing to do with work. It has nothing to do with personal life. Talk to them. Be like, you know what? I'm trying to get better at communicating with the team. Or if you're new, say, you know, I want to set a precedent for how we communicate as a team. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your communication style. What's the best way to reach you? What is the best way, if we have like an emergency situation, how should I approach you? If I have feedback for you, how would you like that feedback delivered? And these things feel awkward. You may be thinking about it and your team and going, I don't think I could ever have that conversation with them. Yeah, none of this stuff is easy because it's intimate. It is intimate to know how people like to be communicated with. It is intimate to ask questions about workload. It is intimate to open up to your leader like, hey, I don't like the way that you talk to me via text. It makes it feel like you're always angry. If you have something important, can we get on a quick call instead? Because your demeanor verbally is better than it is written. Like, those things are not comfortable conversations, but they are so unbelievably important when it comes to establishing a healthy communication pipeline with your staff. In fact, I think it's required. And no, I don't see enough leaders do it at any point in my career. So sit down with your employees, make it a goal this week or this month. You know, you don't have to rush, right? Have a one-on-one with your employees that's outside the norm of your traditional one-on-one. You can even warn them about it. Say like, hey, you know what? Our upcoming one-on-one that we're about to have, we're going to talk about like communication and stuff. Nothing that you did wrong. If you have anything that you want, like question-wise or updates-wise, write them down and send them to me separately and we'll talk about it, or we'll schedule a separate meeting. But this meeting, I want to focus in on how we can improve and make communication as a team more comfortable. And lead the meeting with that in mind. Say, hey, I wanted to talk because I just want to make sure and get better at communicating, right? Not that I think there's anything wrong, or maybe there is, but you know, I want to hear from you your comfortable and favored communication style. And then start running through some scenarios, right? If you're an HR or if you're a leader of people, say, hey, you know, if I have some tough feedback to give, which I don't, right? But if I do, how would you like me to approach that? And they may say, you know what? The second you get it, let's talk about it right away on a phone call. Like, let me know right away. They might say, hey, you know what? You can just send me a message directly with the feedback and give me a chance to think about my response before I respond. You know, there's a lot of different ways that people might feel comfortable, but you can ask them like, hey, when I have difficult feedback to give, whether from a customer or something like that, how would you like that delivered to you? And think about it. You don't have to do it that way, but think that now you have an open line of communication ready to go in the event that happens. There's a level of trust that starts to be built. The next thing, ask them, hey, if we have a really sudden deadline, how would you like to hear about that? Or if we need something done after hours, what's the best way to approach that? How can we prepare for this stuff ahead of time? But if we need to jump on a quick call and do a working session, what's the best way to do that? When you're stressed out, employee, how should I communicate with you? These questions feel so weird because they are inorganic, but they are so helpful. I will tell you that I have worked for amazing leaders that are very open about when they are frustrated. They are very open about like, how are you feeling today? How are you doing today? And those questions cannot come from a place where you don't care. And frankly, we are getting into, as millennials continue to grow on the workforce, as Gen Z starts to enter the workforce, gone away are the days where you can't care about the person that's working the jobs that you've hired them to do. You can't say, you know what? I don't care about their personal life. I don't care about their struggles. They come here and they collect a paycheck. Those days are done. That mentality is outdated. You have to care about your employees now. You have to. You should have been caring about them all along, but you have to care about the person behind the title. You have to. And if you can't do that, I would strongly suggest you don't pursue leadership. Figure out a way to not lead people directly, because working for you is going to be tough. Now, that's a blanket statement. You may have employees that are like, hey, I don't really feel like sharing that stuff with you. I just come here to work and I go home. And they might be the best employee that you have. Congratulations. I guess you have an impersonal relationship with an employee. They're low maintenance. That's fine. You can't force an employee to open up to you. You can't force an employee to like you, but you have to be able to give them an avenue to make sure that they're aware, like, hey, if there's anything ever going on, like, talk to me about it. Let's talk about how we can address it. Life happens. Bad things happen. That doesn't make you a bad employee. And again, that's another topic maybe for another podcast about when life happens to your employee, how to like curve your cynicism, right? I distinctly remember a portion of my life. It was one career that I had started. I had just had a newborn. I was traveling an hour and a half one way to go to this work. I was staying in a hotel because traveling 3 hours every day didn't seem appealing. And honestly, staying in a hotel was not only cheaper, but it was better for my sanity. I had a vehicle. It was actually right around the winter time. So I had to call off a day because I could not drive to my work because of the weather. Within the same week, I got violently sick to the point where I was throwing up, couldn't stay awake, I had terrible flu. The very next week, my son had to go to the hospital. And then the very next week, I had an automotive issue. Am I a bad employee? Am I unreliable? That's a topic for another podcast episode. So make sure to subscribe to the HR Business Partner podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube as well. You can check out me at the HRBP on TikTok as well. Continuing along our theme about communication, if you have open and honest communication, if you understand the type of employees that you have, that doubt that might seep into your head about their reliability when life happens to them starts to go away. Or at least you have a framework to understand this is a reliable employee that wants to be here. And it sucks that these things are happening. Or it springs you forward to say like, hey, you've had a lot of stuff going on in your life. Like, how can I help you? You know, can we give you employee assistance? Can we give you time off? How do you feel right now? And a lot of employees are like, I feel guilty. I don't want to miss work. Or I'm overwhelmed. Or I don't know if this job's right for me. And let me tell you something, viewers and listeners. If you can salvage that, just because you show empathy, just because you are open to those uncomfortable discussions about communication style, you can salvage employees. You can save good employees by simply being there when they need you to be there. And by not shuffling them aside. By just having an understanding that they're human beings. That they didn't apply for your job to not work it. Some do. But most don't. And while it might be frustrating and it might be difficult, if you can get through that, I have seen so many stories of employees that are so unbelievably dedicated to their leader because you were there when they needed it the most. And because you created a comfortable and safe space for them to express frustrations, express disheartenment, and you've given them an avenue to grow and succeed. So as we wrap up this podcast, let me leave you with this as well. We talked about being able to set expectations for communications and being able to create a safe environment for people to be communicated with. But let me end you with this thought too. Have you done enough to praise your employees lately? Have you called them out for the good things that they're doing? Or do you believe that by simply doing what you're paid to do, that's enough? That, hey, you're doing what the job description says. I don't need to tell you good job because I pay you to do that. You're wrong. And you're outdated in your mentality. When an employee does something well, it doesn't matter if it's what you expected them to do or not. Every once in a while, think about praising them for it. Call them out in public. On their next team meeting, say, all right, and I want to take a moment to shout out this person who worked on this project and it went really well. Great work. It's as simple as that. It goes a long way. In your one-on-ones, find a win that you can express once a month, maybe. Not every single one-on-one, then it loses its meaning, right? But like every fourth one-on-one, go, hey, I noticed that you did this. Great work. I appreciate that a lot. You're doing wonderful. Even if your employee is maybe a subpar employee, maybe barely meeting expectations, you can encourage them to do better simply by telling them that they're doing a good job in one area of their work. Keep it up. I would love to see more. You're doing great. I could see the potential in you. All of that is wonderful words. Do not wait till it's too late to provide that feedback, because then you lose your employees' engagement. All right, you have listened to the HR Business Partner Podcast. Again, if you want personalized and express consultation services, head over to Fiverr. Check me out. You can click on a link that I've once again forgotten. It's tinyurl.com/Ratski, R-A-T-S-K-I, Fiverr services. You can go over there and check out everything that I can provide to you. But I appreciate you listening. We'll check you on the next podcast for the HR Business Partner Podcast, wherever podcasts are found, and here on YouTube as well. Thank you.